Welcome back to the Personal Process Podcast. Today we have Evil Mark from the Evil Mark Podcast. He is a podcaster who consistently ranks on the top 50 for the sports section on Apple Podcasts. And he covers all sports, intermixing a little comedy, which we'll see in this episode today with a little pop culture. And I'm really excited to be here with Mark today because he has found a lot of success in podcasting. A lot of people want to do podcasting, but Mark does it well. And I'm here to learn more about his journey, how he got started, the secret sauce he's using, and how we can all apply that to our life. So, with that said, Mark, is there anything that I forgot or anything that you wanted to throw in there?
No, that's pretty. That's a what a great intro, and thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. I love to talk. I love to talk sports, but I also love to talk podcasting, and I think it's the. I know we'll get into it, but I think it's going to be the new gold rush for media. And if you're not in, like everyone's like, oh, is it too late to get in? Is it too late? It's never too late to get in. It's like now is the absolute best time to get in.
And what makes you say that?
Well, because FM radio is dead. Like AM radio is already dead. No one listens to AM radio. FM radio is dead as well. You can see everyone is going to podcasting or they're having an audio component with it. Like I just got done watching an episode of a popular HBO show, and there literally is the audio companion is a podcast. So everyone else, the major companies see the writing on the wall that this is going to be the new media. So as far as the audio media goes, because you're going to need something to listen to, and you cannot listen to FM radio because it's just terrible. There's just too many advertisements. It's just overwhelming. So there has to be an alternative. And like I know people think like, oh, there's so many bad ones, but there's a lot of really good ones. And it's just about being discovered. And I think in my mind, this is just getting started. As radio continues to decline, there's going to be a space for other creators to fill that void, that media void. And they're either going to be on top of it or they're not, or it's going to be, it's either going to be hobbyists or people who are trying to make money out of this, or trying not so much make money, but actually like do their thing and do something that they really love and make it a business.
Absolutely. And Mark, before we actually get into how to get discovered and things of that nature, I want to hear from you. What were you doing prior to podcasting and what led you down this journey?
Well, I originally started this. I started this back in 2016. I was a person who's on the internet, just being a troll, doing nonsense, just having fun. And then I started a podcast back in 2016 that I actually found some success with. And then I was gone for a little while, and I knew I wanted to come back. And I just always loved that audio space. And that's what kind of inspired me to, that's what always like. That's where I originally came from. Was in radio for a little while. I did stand up
Mm,
comedy, and I've always listened to podcasts, and I always knew that there was a way to do audio. And we kind of saw the writings on the wall even 5 years ago that this was going to be the way to go. But it was like I knew I wanted to get back into this space.
absolutely. And with regards to where you started to where you are now, clearly, well, I'm assuming that you didn't just jump in and you were top 50 from day one. So, what were some things that you were doing when you first started that you wish you would have changed with the knowledge that you have now?
I think what the thing that benefited my show the most has been the planning. So I took about a year to plan what I wanted to do exactly, from how I was going to post, how I was going to manage my time, how I was going to meet this. I was going to get X number of shows per week, how I wanted it to sound. I spent hundreds of hours listening to other sports podcasts to figure out like what do I like about them, what do I not like about them. So it's not so much about like getting from episode 1 to episode 50 and being in the top 50. It's totally doable. I think what the big misstep here is the planning not going into the work. Like anytime I'd have an idea during that year process, if I was like, yeah, I want to implement this, I'd always take that idea, write it down, flesh it out, and then I'd put it back in the hopper for 2 weeks, and then revisit it and think like, okay, is this still going to work? It was a lot of demoing, like a lot of thinking about, a lot of demoing it to friends and other business associates. Like, hey, does this sound like something that would be interesting? Like, it was really mostly it was more about planning than what I actually did once we launched. Once we launched, it was more about altering the plan and iterating the plan, making it better show to show. But from top to bottom, and I know this is going to sound extremely arrogant, like everything that we've done from episode 1 to 50 is like it was in our roadmap. It was in our roadmap planning. Like we knew this was going to happen. We just didn't know it was going to happen this fast. Like we didn't know we were going to find success this fast. I think that's the biggest surprise for us.
Okay. And with regards to the planning, so what was like the biggest thing in the plan that you think gave the most value?
Knowing exactly what the show was, like knowing what I was going to offer, what other people's offerings look like and how mine was specifically different. If I was, there's a million people who every week start a Joe Rogan podcast because they're like, yeah, I could do that. But have you listened to enough of them? Do you think, like, have you listened to yourself? Do you go, okay, well, I'm providing something of value there? What are you going to do that's can be in the same kind of genre, but what's something new or unique that you're going to bring to it? So it was really a lot of that was the knowing the space, knowing the genre that I wanted to do, how exactly what was going to be my twist on that genre, how would it be any different? And the only way to know that would be to go out and listen to everybody else. It's just like there's a lot of parallels to stand up comedy. Like you have to be a fan of comedy before you can go and be an actual great comedian. You have to know everybody else and what they're doing and how these jokes are structured, what they're doing, what you think you should be doing, what you like and what you don't like. Like you'll always be your biggest critic, but you have to be a critic of everybody else to kind of feed into your ideas and how you're going to develop your own projects.
Absolutely. And that's such an interesting thing. I want to know specifically on your show because there's a million other sports shows. I think sports are one of the things that a lot of guys are like, "Hey, I should get me and my bro to start a sports podcast. We always watch the NFL, NBA, and all that." So, what was the unique angle that you found in your show that really resonated with you internally that you were able to use and give back to your audience to get the success that you did?
Yeah, so I knew that I loved the podcasting because I had done a political podcast in 2016, and then around 2017 I was done, and then I knew I was going to come back, but then COVID happened, and there was about 6 months prior to that I was planning, but I kind of understood that I loved sports talk. Like me personally, what I listened to during the day when I would be driving back and forth to my regular job or I'd be doing things, I'd be listening to sports talk radio, and I'd be like, because I'm a huge sports fan, and to me it was always lacking. Like I'd always be like, this isn't that great, or some of this is kind of funny, some of it's not funny. And the more I listened to it, because I thought I was going to do a different show, I was ready to be a Joe Rogan clone. I was ready to be like, I'm going to get guest lists and I'm going to start bringing people on, and we're going to have long form conversations. And I was like, and I was always split on that. Like, then I would plan for that, but then I would be listening to all these sports talk shows, and I'd be like, oh, this is what I like because I talk about sports, and I love to just talk about sports at a bar. And I was like, if only the sports talk wasn't so ad filled, and if only it wasn't so terrible. Like, if there was a way to do this, so they use the same kind of format, the same kind of if you listen to the show every Tuesday, you're going to get the same exact bits, not the same stuff, but you know where the format is. So you're on this audio journey just like you would on natural radio. But if it was kind of twisted with the liberating aspects of podcasting, then it would be much more interesting. And that was my kind of idea originally, was like, it's going to be sports talk for people obviously people who like sports talk, but it's sports talk for people who may not even like sports, who may just be casual sports fan, who aren't really maybe adept at, or really know all the like ins and outs of the sports talk genre, like all the little nuances and all these things, because they probably don't listen to tons of hours of sports talk. Not many people do, unless you're in a car all the time, or you're a trucker, or you absolutely love sports and you can't get enough watching sports. You got to hear it on the radio. So my whole idea was, I'm going to take sports talk and I'm going to put my twist on it and do it exactly how I want to do it, which involves more comedy, involves more pop culture, and makes it more interesting. So it's something that you could listen to and you wouldn't be like, I don't understand why we're talking about. I don't understand what he's saying. He's giving me terms and terminology that I don't understand. It's literally like, if you can watch a game and know, like, oh, they're winning, they're losing, this is a fun thing to watch, then you could listen to my program and you could get a lot out of it too. It's the fun part of sports talk, which sports talk should have been in the first place, in my mind.
That's amazing. And it sounds like to me while I'm hearing this, like you're kind of just putting this person in your own room and they're just hanging out with you like a friend. You're making a couple of jokes, you're talking about sports, not in a way that they can't understand. So they feel like they're able to follow you on the journey. And that's an interesting take. I like that. And I think that when you go through this route, you hit a niche that's missing. At least that's what I'm assuming through your hours of experience
Yeah,
listening.
yeah. Everybody I listen to, the one things, or the commonalities would be like a lot of advertisements, like a lot of advertisements, like not only like advertising at the stop, at the start, in the middle, like, oh, we're going to go to the AutoZone phone line. Like everything would be, every little part of it was so sold. It was really hard to focus on talking about the sports. And the other part of that was when they would talk about sports, they'd be such in a rush to try to prove that they're an expert or they know more than everybody else on TV. And you can't run a show and do all this other stuff and consume that much. So had to be a little bit more personable and more accessible to everybody. And then it also wanted to kind of weave in that, like, most guys who like sports and I can say guys because like my show is mainly 95% male, they like other things, like movies, or like TV shows, like all of those kind of intersect. They're never separate topics. They're really all intertwined. Like when you compare one guy to another guy, you can make Marvel comparisons. Like these things happen in bars. These things happen in real life. Like why shouldn't they happen on a talk show?
That's super interesting. So I just want to bring it back to the plan. So when you were doing the plan for this, you want to do a sports show, but is this kind of what you did? You're like, okay, well, we're probably going to hit 95% guys. What do guys who like sports like? And then you hit these interconnecting webs. And how did you go about figuring out what these webs are?
Yeah, I kind of focused on like I listen to everything out there, and I kind of decide like this is what I don't like about it. Or if I like I'd listen to the most popular shows, the top 10 most popular shows, and I'd be like, okay, these are the five things I like. These are the five things I didn't like. If I had to take over that show tomorrow, like if I had to go in there and I had to take over Stugatz, I had to go fill in for Pat McAfee, what would I change? What would I make different right then and there because of what I don't like, and how could I make that show better? And that was always how I approached every other show I listened to. I would listen to them, figure out all their elements, figure out exactly how they did it, and then I kind of have an idea of what their plan was or what their goal was, and then I could kind of take it and be like, okay, if I had to step into that role, what would I change right away? How would I make that better for me as a listener? And then I would go like, okay, well, and then I would go and try to reach out, talk to those fans on Reddit or different boards, and I'd be like, hey, like, what do you not like about the show? What do you wish would change about it? And I would also elicit that feedback too, and I'd be putting that into my hopper and my roadmap, being like, yeah, they kind of agree with me on this, they don't agree with me on that, and just taking that idea of who's controlling that space of where you want to be, who's the top right now, what are they doing that they're doing wrong that you could do better, or you could put a twist on it.
That's insane. And it seems to me like what the comment that just keeps back coming back in the back of my head is just like research, try it. Research, try it.
Hmm.
Research, refine. Research, refine. And I feel like this is such a missed point in the world of podcasting. I don't know about you, Mark. Well, actually, I do know now. But when I first started my podcasting, I kid you not, I downloaded the Anchor app, which allows you to do a podcast for free. I threw on one of these headphones. I
Mm.
just literally recorded like that. I had no idea what this was going to do or how it was going to start. And I just posted it. But it seems that, well, not seems. As I grew more, I tried to do the same things that you are, learn about my audience, learn about the type of content I want to put out there. And it's such a critical piece because if you don't know the people that are your listeners, how are you going to make content that resonates with them? And without that, you have nothing. And I think this is such a critical point that needs to be the almost the first thing that podcasters really think about. What do you think about that?
Definitely, yeah. Everyone is such in a rush. I mean, everyone when they look for help, they're looking for like equipment help or like software help or what can I do to get everything going right now, or like what can I do so me and my friends can start a podcast right now. Like everyone's thinking about the actual aspects of the technical aspects of how to get this thing put together, how to get it out. But the whole idea of like how can I make a good show, or what's going to be good product that people like, that always comes later, and that's like the biggest problem. Like when people talk to me and they're like, okay, well, how did you go from episode 1 to episode 40, whatever, and now you're in the top 50? It doesn't make sense. Like people think it's unfair, and I'm like, if you would have known, if I would have started this the moment I wanted to, like most people, then yeah, I would be at episode 100, 150 right now, and then it would make more sense to everybody. They'd be like, oh yeah, well, he had to find his way and kind of work the show out, and you look back, you listen back to episode 1, and you realize it's totally different from what you have now. So instead of going through that process of it's almost like punishing yourself, is in my mind, is just rather plan it out, like have know exactly what you're going to do. I think of it in my regular life, I'm a software developer. I think of this like road mapping. So if you're going to build something, if you're going to build an app or you're going to build a product, then you have to be on the workbench first. You have to know exactly what it's going to be, what it's going to accomplish, what it's going to do, what are the features, how is it different, what is it going to look like when you bring it to market, what is it going to make it different, why would you download this podcast, why would your friends download this podcast? Like if you can't answer all those questions and do all that work before it, there's no wonder that people start and then they stop and then things like that. And this is like, even if you haven't asked for my advice, but I'm going to give it, is like, if you have a podcast right now and you're like it's not focused, then it's okay to like bring it down, fix it up, retool it, do all your planning, and then do a rebrand and a relaunch. It makes more sense to do it like that than rather than to have one foot in, one foot out, and you're kind of half-assing it on the microphone, and you're also half-assing it in your planning. Like if you're going to take it seriously and you want to do something that's really interesting or cool, then yeah, you got to do the planning for it. Everything involves planning. There's no just shortcut. You start and then they're going to be like, oh my gosh, you're just like Mark Maron. It's not like that anymore. Like I know everyone thinks it's like that, but it'll never be like that again. Like there's a certain level of it's great because we're going into this period where there's so much growth, but there is a certain level of like there's a professionalism in this, right? Because podcasting is, like it or not, if we're getting involved with brands, and the moment we say we want to get paid for it, not when we get paid, but the moment we say like I want to get paid for this, you are in show business at that point. You're not in the podcasting business. You are in the media creation business. You are in show business. So if you're in show business, then you're going to put out a product. I don't care who it is, whoever, even people who make independent movies, think and plan and do before they even bring the product to market. So why would you be different than anybody else? You're in show business. How are you different than anyone else in show business? There's just level of scales, right? There's the art house indie director, and then there's Marvel, and then there's you. We're all in the same business. It's just, why would you be different than anyone else? Why are you going to cut the line in front of anybody else if you're not willing to do the work?
Wow. He just dropped some heavy bars in there, my man. And the thing is, Mark, like, so I have a very creative brain, but based on your profession and just the way that you're talking, you have a very analytical, systematic brain. And it's just incredible because for me, these kind of things are a little less intuitive, but like listening it from your perspective, I 100% agree. If you don't know the product you're selling, if you don't know the differentiating factors, you don't know who you are. And if you don't know who you are, how can you pitch yourself to others, right? It's like if you have let's say you're an entrepreneur or something, you make a product and you don't know who it's for. Who are you going to talk to? There's a billion
Yeah.
people, there's like billions of people on this world. You can't target them. And that's such a critical point. That was just fire, man. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot of, this is why I was like, anytime I'm invited to go talk about podcasting, I'm like, I love to talk about podcasting because I've done this on Reddit and other channels before. And I'm like, and I basically am I always get the feedback I always get is crickets because like I'm telling you things like you don't want to hear. Like the other part of this is like, you have to do marketing. You have to get your feet wet in marketing. You have to go out and ask for money, and you have to go out and ask for sponsorships and ask for deals. So once I've told you that, like, hey, guess what, you're in show business, and boom, you're going to have to learn. Maybe you're not going to have to master marketing, but you're going to have to learn enough marketing to get yourself off the ground. People go, no, 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 no. Let's talk about microphones. Should I get the Shure? Should I get the Rogan mic, or should I get the other one? I heard this one show. Like everyone wants to have these weird, detailed like tech conversations. There's so much, and I love tech, but there's like such a they get so far down the tech rabbit hole, but the marketing and the branding, they're like, no, 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 I'm good. Like I don't even have to worry about that because I'm just going to focus on the microphone. Like that's the whole part of it. How would you sell anything if you didn't focus on the branding and the marketing of it? If you're just like, oh, I'm going to make a really good product, which is important, which is number one. But if you make the best product in the world and you refuse to market it, it will never work. Word of mouth only works for amazing, amazing, ridiculously crazy, stupid products that have a particular niche that fill a particular need, and they'll fly off the shelves. We're creating media. No one's going to come up with an idea that's so brilliant that's just going to take off on its own. You're going to have to do some of the marketing work. This is why people don't like me, because I give them the bad news up front. You're in the show business, which everyone goes, oh no, I don't know, no, and now you have to do marketing, which is like these are the two rough realities of going from hobbyist to making a business. Like this is the line of demarcation. Are you a hobbyist, or do you want to do this for keeps, or do you want to at least take a shot at doing this for keeps? Then you need those two elements, and you need to have a kind of a change in thinking.
Absolutely. And I just want to know, with regards to marketing, what do you think were your top 3 tips that you've uncovered through your journey that new podcasters would really benefit from?
Yeah, the biggest pitfall is you go like, well, okay, I'm all in, Mark. I'm all in. I'm going to make sure that my podcast has a website. I'm going to make sure that my podcast, well, first of all, the number one rule is like, if you don't look like a business, no one is ever going to give you money. If you don't look like a professional, no one's going to pay you like a professional. It's, this, unless you are brilliant, you're the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, or you're going to show up in a hoodie and someone's going to give you money. It doesn't work like that. You have to look like a professional to be paid like a professional. And that doesn't mean you need to look like you, the person, need to look, because obviously you can see I'm wearing a hat and I'm in I'm in my space. You can see all my pictures and stuff in the background. Like, but you have to have your website done. You have to have your branding done. You have to have, when people email you, if I was to email you and say, hey, I wanted to be on your show, if I emailed you and it was at Gmail, no one is going to give you money consistently if you were at Gmail. There's like such cheap tools like Office 365, Google Suites, that literally cost less than $10 a month, that can at least give you the illusion of professionalism. And that's like the bare minimum, right? Like if you're going to a job interview and you don't even bother to dress up, then you're saying you're basically telling them to piss off, and you're not even trying. Like if you're going to go to a job interview, your goal is to put your best foot forward. Even if you're not the best candidate, you have to look like the best candidate and present yourself like the best candidate. Why would anything be different in this space? So that's number one, is the look professional to actually be a professional. And the other part of marketing, so that's the main part of marketing, because if you don't have that, does all the rest isn't going to matter. The other thing I wish I would have learned in marketing, which I learned the hard way, hundreds and hundreds of dollars, is like I was like, I'm going to buy a Facebook ad, I'm going to buy a Twitter ad, like I'm going to buy this ad, that ad, and all this money that was wasted because I didn't really think about. I had spent all this time planning, but at the same time, when I started doing marketing, I'm like, I'm just going to throw money at it and it'll fix itself. Like the amount, which is funny because I was like, yes, I've planned everything down to a T, but I'd never thought about my marketing. Now I'm just going to throw money at it, and I've wasted a bunch of money. Like you have to know, where are you advertising? What boards are you going to advertise on? Where are you going to target your advertising? It also comes down to, who is your listener? Who exactly is your listener? And be very, very specific. What three things could you tell me about your listeners specifically? And I don't mean like, there are people who like, there are people who really like podcasts. That's not specific enough. That's a lot of people like podcasts. It's who specifically would like your show, and I mean specifically. Like mine is for sports talk fans who do not like sports talk radio, or sports talk fans who are casual sports fans. I would get even more detailed than that. Like sports talk fans who are sports fans who may not know sports talk, but they love sports and they love to talk online about sports, or they love to be part of online groups. Like now we're getting really, really targeted. And then the other half of that is knowing where these people are. So if I know people who love sports and love to talk about sports, they're going to love a podcast about sports. I need to advertise where exactly they are. I need to target those ads instead of just giving them money and giving $500 to Reddit and going, figure it out. Yeah, post my ad everywhere. And if my ad's posted all over, politics, who's going to want to listen to my show if my ad is running in politics? It has to be tailored to who I want as my listener. So you have to know your listener, and then you have to target your listener and then bring them in.
For sure. And with regards to targeting a fan like that who posts on online sites, discusses, and likes sports but isn't like the regular, sports radio, how did you target them? Like, where did you find these people?
I knew that my particular program would have a little bit of an edge to it, because like it's more dirty, it's more kind of like the idea that it's uncensored and we can kind of talk about what we want. There's really nothing that we really go wild about, but I knew that like that's going to kind of be the idea, that you would listen to me, that you would hear things that I would say that you wouldn't hear Dan Patrick say, or you wouldn't hear Jim Rome say. Like I would be able to kind of fill that kind of gap, because I'd be kind of unique in the sports talk space, because most of those people are they work clean. So I knew that I wanted listeners who love sports, but who also kind of intersected with pop culture, who liked like kind of things that were a little bit, more, a little bit more, edgier in pop culture. So I started targeting like, okay, we're going to look at sports. Reddit was like a perfect example. This Reddit is one of the most underused advertising spaces ever. The self-service advertising used to be a lot better. Now it's a little bit more difficult to work, but it's definitely like, I would go, okay, well, I want to look for people who are part of, who are fans of all these other sports talk shows, but they're also fans of like maybe a popular pop culture thing like Breaking Bad, or they like something that's got a little bit more edge to it. So if they fall into both of those categories, if you love Breaking Bad and you love sports, and you like say you love the Philadelphia Eagles, and you're on a Philadelphia Eagles board posting all the time, and you love Breaking Bad, then you're a person that I would want to talk to, because you probably like something with a little bit more edge. You like sports, you like pop culture. You could definitely come back. You could bring that person into the fold.
Right on. That's a way that so you're essentially getting the people that you want from the sports field, but also from the edgy field, and that kind of merges. And I don't know if you watched Dragon Ball Z back in the day, but you do a little fusion, and it makes the Evil Mark show.
Yeah,
That's
Reddit, and Reddit is really great for this, because Reddit, you can not only target that one particular person, but you can say, well, do they share this trait and that trait? Are they part of both of these subs? Like I look at my own experience, like when I look at all the subs that I'm subscribed to, like yeah, there's a lot of pop culture stuff, there's a lot of sports stuff. So I would be the perfect advertising target for myself, because I'm on Oregon Ducks and Pac-12 stuff and Arizona Cardinal stuff all the time, just talking nonsense. So I spend a lot of time there just literally posting, and then I'm also part of like a Better Call Saul group and these other popular TV shows. Yeah, I'm right in the wheelhouse of the kind of listener that I would want.
absolutely. And first of all, Better Call Saul, Great show.
Great show,
Um,
really great show.
great show. So I'm wondering, so Facebook can do this too, because I used to do e-commerce on Facebook where we're targeting people, and you're able to select a person who likes, I don't know, brands such as MVMT. I'm not sure if you remember those watches on Facebook
Yep,
back in the
yep.
day, and just other things that are similar in the realm. So I'm wondering how, if you just didn't do the specification on Facebook, or what it was about Reddit that really just gave you a bigger value for the amount of money that you put in.
My thought process was, and I kind of when I would see that, I spent money at both, and I was literally the money went better. Like Facebook worked, Facebook was not bad, but Reddit worked better for me. And I think a lot of it was because if you're with Facebook, you can just go in there, you can look. Like I have Facebook, and I can look at my friends, and I go, oh yeah, so and so had a kid, or so and so. I was This isn't really a funny story, but I like a friend of mine called me the other week, and she was like, hey, did you know so and so passed away? And I'm like, no, I'm their friend on Facebook. Why don't I know that? And I'm like, and I started looking through there. I'm like, oh, I never actually looked through these feeds. I look at maybe like the first five or six things, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's cool. Okay, whatever. Like I just okay, well, yeah, everyone's doing the same thing. Everyone's posting the same meme, and so yeah, it worked for me, but it didn't work as good as Reddit. I think Reddit, you have a fan base that's willing to be online. They're willing to post. They're willing to comment, and I think they spend more time on there. I think anyone who's actually
Oh
used
yeah.
Reddit, yeah, will literally tell you can lose hours in Reddit, looking, not even posting, not even like going in there to cause trouble, just literally going in there and looking around and seeing things. And I feel like that's the kind of a person who would listen to a podcast more so than a Facebook person in my mind. But I got to tell you, like, that's where I'm putting like all my eggs right now. But as we grow out, like there's a limit to how much you can use one platform, and you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. So Facebook's is probably going to be the next one I move it to. I'm also pretty excited about Twitter. I've seen some pretty good stuff about Twitter as far as building out advertisements and how you can advertise posts. I've been really kind of impressed with the work they're doing over there as well. But yeah, as far as those two ones, I think Facebook and Reddit's like the most undervalued one right now because everyone knows Facebook. Not everyone knows about Reddit. So if anything, if you can get on Reddit before everyone else starts flooding on there and self-serving ads, like this is the best time to do it. And this is why I go back to the whole gold rush analogy is right, is because like 5 years from now, like these self-serve ads are probably going to cost a lot more. Like we're right in the perfect time frame where podcast is blowing up and advertising is kind of cheap. So it's like the perfect time to be in right now within like I'd say the next 18 to 24 months. After that, like that, those self-serve ads might really go up, and the advertising space might really shrink for us. So if you're somebody like myself who was a comedian who never really got a huge following, like I was barely a paid regular at a couple clubs. Like I'm not Mark Maron. I didn't get like have this national following and never had a special, never had anything like that. I was literally a guy who was barely getting paid to be on stage. So so I'm like, if you're starting from zero, I'm right there with you because I was starting at like maybe, you know, 0.25, like maybe like, so I was right there at almost absolute zero when I started too. So you got to get that marketing, and right now is the perfect time to get marketing for cheap.
That's money. And I want to go through that journey of how your listeners increased, how you felt through it, and yeah, just the whole process of it. So, like, if we're starting right from the get go, talk to me about like month one. Like, I know you had a plan about this, and I know you've done a podcast before, and I know that you're confident about the plan, but were you like feeling 100% throughout that first month? Did you have any swaying emotions? How are you feeling? How did the results go? Tell me about
Before I recorded the first episode, it was pretty brutal because I knew that I was like, and just like any podcaster will tell you, recording episode one is like, because like, okay, well, if this doesn't work out, then I'm going to be the one listening to episode one, and I'm going to be like, oh, this whole thing's a mess. I totally screwed this up. And if you do really good, then people are going to be listening to episode one, and they're going to be like, this was used to be terrible. He's so much better now. Like you will never win with episode one, and I kind of let that get into my head, and I didn't want to record it here in my home. I was like, I'm going to go to Las Vegas. I'm gonna go party, and then I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna have everything set up so I could just sit down and plop down and boom, like record episode one, and I could just get over it. That was really tough because I must have turned on and off the mic at least half a dozen times because I was like, I don't know, man. Maybe this whole year of planning, like I should just pack this in. Like
it.
that was, but once I got one done, and then I started moving forward, and I started actually working my plan. I knew like, okay, I'm good now that I did one. I've got all that out of the way, and I know it's going to be cringe no matter how much I think it's really good or not. It's going to be bad. The first one's never going to be like, oh, that was my greatest one ever. Like you're always going to get better, and you have to start somewhere. So that was a challenge. But after that, yeah, it was just about okay, well, now I need to keep this up consistently. I need to be able to, even if you're just doing interviewing, you got to be a good writer. Like you have to be able to kind of know what your setup is going to be, what your questions are going to be, or how your show is going to go. Like you have to really be involved in your own show, and you have to be really involved in your own thought process. And so just being a better writer, like I could see from episode 1 to like episode 5 when I was trying to churn these out every week, I was like, I got to meet the goal no matter what. But at the same time, I got to see, like, look what I'm doing during the week and see where I'm failing. How can I make this better for me? So I always thought, like, in my mind, there's like there's three rules of podcast. You haven't asked for them, but I'm gonna give them anyway. So you need to you need to iterate. You always need to get better. Every time you write one or you do the first episode, you always want episode 2 to be better than 1. You always want to iterate. You always want to make things better no matter what you're doing. And how you're writing. You write episode 1 or you write most of how it's supposed to look in episode 1. When you write episode 2, you're going to look at everything you messed up in episode 1. How can you make episode 2 better? And so on. So you're always iterating. There'll never be a time where you go, okay, well, this is a template. And then I'm just going to take this template, throw it over here, and I'm going to start filling this in, and then I'll know what to do. You've already failed. Every single time that you're bringing it over and you're starting it again, there should be an improvement always. And the other idea that I kind of grew out of my planning was you need to kind of automate. So if there's a way to automate something without having to manually do it, because anyone who's created a podcast knows there's editing time, and then if you're doing marketing and engagement time, there's like I heard a stat that's like most podcasters spend a good like 11 hours a week working on their podcast, and now when they've actually measured the time, it's closer to like 14 hours. So you're
Yeah.
literally signing up for a part-time job, like it or not. You think like, oh, I'm going to get this done quick. So any kind of tools you can use to kind of shrink the time to go, okay, well, now I don't have to worry about that. I can set this up so that this will work. These automated processes, this will post to Twitter, this will post to Reddit, this will post to Facebook. The feed will automatically come down and it'll automatically start getting edited. Have an automatic editor. I believe in that a lot. Automated editing is really great. Why anybody is paying an editor, I don't know why, but there's also an element of being live on MP3 that I like too. But um, so that's rule 2. Iterate, automate, and then the third would just be measure relentless. Where are you at? What are your numbers? What did you different? What are you doing day to day to day to day? You always have to be in your numbers and in your creative process. In your numbers, I mean, not only your downloads, those are important too, but what are you doing to get more downloads measurably? Like I'm going to put in, even if it's small, like I'm going to put $10 into advertising this week. That's okay. If that's what you can afford, that's what you can afford. But if you're going to put $10 and if you're going to put $1 into advertising, you need to measure exactly what you're getting. Okay, I ran this ad. I got, you know, 5,000 impressions. So I got 5,000 people who actually viewed this ad. How many click through? What's my cost per click? How many, am I retaining these people? I got 5 people on Monday. The next time I had an episode, like, does that number stay at, whatever plus 5, or was it the same low number before, or was it different? You got to kind of, these kind of advanced statistics like aren't really available on like most platforms. You got to kind of like read between the lines to kind of figure out what you're doing, because no one is really thinking of these. But you got to be thinking about, if you're going to spend money on advertising, what are you paying to acquire a customer or a listener, and then are you retaining them? Because it's one thing to get them, but it's another thing to get them and keep them. And if you're figuring out that you're finding success every time you spend your advertising dollars, you're getting people walk in the door and you're keeping more of them week to week, then okay, this advertising plan is actually working. This, I'm doing something right. If you're putting money in and you're not getting anybody plus other than that +1 when they initially came in, then you got a bigger problem. Then that means people came in the door, they listened to your product, and they were like, no, not for me. So that's the point where you got to go, okay, well, are we iterating? Those are your numbers will tell you what's wrong. Your numbers are your angel on your shoulder telling you like, hey man, look, things aren't going good. Like you might need to change something.
Yeah. And I'm just interested about your journey specifically with numbers. Like, how did your first month go?
Yeah, my first month was pretty tough. We I think it was just a couple hundred for the first episode, and then second, like all the 7-day numbers. So when I think of numbers, I think of in 7 days, especially
Yeah.
when you're talking about sports. When you have a long form podcast, like you can deal in like, okay, what are your numbers in 30 days? Because someone can come back and listen to this conversation at any point in the future and they could get something out of it, or they could
Yep.
find something funny out of it. When you're doing sports or news or politics, you have a literal shelf. Like what you talk about today, like if you were to talk about Kyle Rittenhouse today, no one would care. People would be kind of upset with you that you're wasting their time. Like unless you have something really interesting to say about that hot political topic, like it's come and gone. Like if you're talking about Kyle Rittenhouse right now and you're not talking about Amber Heard, now I just literally dated your podcast. Like you are
Yep.
literally, yeah, you've missed the boat. So when it comes to politics, sports, anything that's timely, you don't have that evergreen kind of feel. You have 7 days to win. You have 7 days where your numbers actually count. Your 30-day numbers don't actually count. You can sell it to advertisers and you can maybe con somebody in that, but that's all nonsense. What really matters is your 7 days. So in the 7 days, we maybe 100 the first episode, and then I started moving up, and then it was I actually keep it. I actually track this in my own tracker because I know Podbean keeps it, but I actually took it out of Podbean and I actually track it in Google Data Sources or whatever their free one is. So it started like 100, then it was like 150, then 200, and then I started doubling my marketing efforts. Then it was like 500, 700,000, and then I knew like, okay, well my mark. Then I started figuring out where my marketing dollars are best spent. And then once I found it was Reddit, then instead of going, oh, I'm going to put $20 in this week, I was like, I'm going to put $100 in this week, and that's where you really start to accelerate the growth. When I kind of picked and prodded and poked and figured out which marketing path worked for me. Once I found the right marketing path, I was like, yes, this is where I'm going to go all in. I'm going to move a bit of money. I think it was like the first ad buy was like my first real ad buy was like $100. I'm like, I'm going to move this money to the center of the table and I'm going to bet on myself because I like the show that I do. I think I'm doing good work. I think it's not as good as I wanted it to be. I think it's going to get better and better, but like I know this marketing channel is going to work and it's going to bring people in. And I think when we started doing the college football show and I brought on a co-host, then I was like, I'm definitely I did another test, started like poking around, and then it went from 15. Now we're in like month 2 or 3, but then it went from like 1,500 a show to 3,000 to 4,500. That's when it
Wow.
really started piling in. It was like I found the right marketing channel and I just started working that channel. And I was like, I got to be there. And what's weird is like I thought I would have got like the whole time. I'm like, I don't really get a lot of emails. I only get 1 or 2 emails for people who listen to my show. There's people who listen to my show. Like, why? What you'll find is like the people who listen to podcasts and the people who actually email a podcast. Just this is just like radio. They're two totally different people. Normal
Mm.
people will listen and be like, I love that guy's show. I think he's great, and they'll tell all their friends about it, and they'll be your biggest fan. But they will never bother to email you. They kind of have this line in the sand, like, "Oh yeah, I love that guy, but I wouldn't want to bother." The freaks and weirdos will be the ones who are like, "Yes, he should hear from me, so I'm going to email him." And you go like, "Well, why is only 0.5% of my audience actually emailing me?" Yeah, it's because you have to have a huge audience to have that 0.5% be a large enough a group of freaks who will email you every week. That's the difficult thing there. You're like, I'm doing good, but I don't hear from anybody. I don't get any retweets. I don't get any likes. I don't get any emails from my audience, but I'm doing really good. My marketing's working. It's like, yeah, because the people who email you are weirdos. Like you just gotta come to the grips that people who really like your show are listening and they're going, yes, I like this guy, and they're moving on with their life.
Yeah, for sure. And Mark, I'm just wondering, what was a point in your podcast where you either thought that if you had this, that it wasn't going to work, or a point where you're just like, okay, we're going for the gold rush. We just made it. Like, do you have a moment that comes to you when I mention these?
Yeah, I mean, I think both are kind of wrapped into a show we did at the end of the college football season. We did this one called, and we were struggling with audio issues. Like we had bounced between like, um, I had a whole board. I forget the name of the board. Like I bought this fancy $900 soundboard and it had all my sound effects there. And we were just struggling with audio issues because we were doing it through Zoom. We were patching it through a board. Like again, like we had gone down that whole technical rabbit hole, like I talk about most first podcasters do, and we had all this great tech and all this, I had the Rogan mic, I had the Mark Maron mic, and here I am spending all this money and I'm like, but our sound really, really was lacking. And we did this really, really ambitious episode called the Shibbies, which is like an award show. So it was presented in a podcast form, but instead of being our regular show, it was like an award show, like the Academy Awards, but it was all audio. It was all about college football, and we talked about these awards. And there was a laugh track, and like and we were like right in the middle of really struggling with our audio issues, and we took on this really really ambitious episode just for fun because it was the end of the college football season. We were sad, but at the same time, like we wanted to do more content about it, and we wanted to fill that day, and we thought like this would be really fun. Like, and like we knew, like I knew, like our my show wasn't ready to kind of take that kind of project because it was so ambitious, especially when we were struggling. Um, but we did it anyway. And as soon as we recorded it and I listened back to it before I posted it, I was like, this is terrible. I might junk this episode because the audio is so bad. The clapping's going over the talking, and we're trying to make the jokes, and you're making a joke, and then you're having an audience do like a laugh, and like it was so. In my mind, it was so terrible. Like I was like, this sound doesn't match what I wanted it to be, and this is way more ambitious than I thought it would be. But so I was ready to wrap it up. I was ready, like I'm like, maybe this is going to work. Maybe there's just too many audio problems. Maybe we need to regroup and come back when we can actually resolve these audio problems or figure out a different service or software. But we posted it up, and then I knew the moment we made it, when we got all the emails that I was expecting, the feedback that I got, instead of going like, your audio sucked, you suck, blah 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 blah, like all the normal stuff, everything that I was expecting, people were like, that was a really really good idea. I can't wait till you get that next year. I can't wait till you sort everything out and you do that next year. This is going to be so much fun. I've never heard an award show that was like taken so seriously for something, for nonsense. I never, like, someone emailed says like, I've never seen somebody take nonsense so seriously and present it so, present it so matter of factly, and I loved it. I can't wait till next year when you do this next year, because it's going to be so much more fun. And I was like, I got a couple of those emails, and that was like, I was like, we're good. The fact that people were like, I don't even mind your junk audio. I love the fact that it's so ambitious, and I love what you're doing. That's when I knew. I was like, yeah, then we just got to keep going. We got to keep doing what we're doing, but we need to like sort out the audio problem. Like, that was like a huge thing for us. But yeah, that same show was, maybe we should pack it in. And then once we got that feedback and we saw the numbers come back and they did more numbers than we really thought it would, we were praying that it would do just as much as the other shows, when we were averaging about 8 or 9,000. I think we did 15. Like, that was a
Wow.
spike. So it was really amazing. Like, that was the point, because of that show with its terrible audio. And I suggest no one go back and listen to it. But because of that ambitious idea, that's what got like other like sponsorship people to email us or say like, oh hey, we saw you, we actually saw you on the charts. That show led the groundwork to us getting to the charts. And by the time we got there, because of that show that we thought was really bad, that was one of the one that kind of drove home the idea that we are actually doing something unique and different that no one else is doing, and people trusted us enough to go, okay, yeah, they're going to figure it out. And
That's
that's why
huge.
you'll see me. I have my Mark Maron, Joe Rogan mic is back in the corner, and you'll see me on a headset, and like all my sound effects are on the computer. Like, everyone gets so far down this tech rabbit hole, but like, you have to find what works for you and like how you can edit around it. Like, it's got to be what makes you comfortable. Because if you like, when I had that giant board in front of me, I had a board, and I got my co-host here talking, and I'm trying to run the board. Like, I'm pretending like I'm three different people. Like, I'm pretending I'm Rogan and Jamie in one person. You can't do both. You have to kind of like shrink it down so it's easy and accessible for you.
For sure. And it's such an interesting point, the one that you just mentioned. You really don't know what works until you publish. And I feel like, especially if you're dedicated to your craft, you have a little bit of especially, I'd reckon that if you have an analytical brain like you do, Mark, you're a little bit cynical with your performance and you don't give yourself the benefit of the doubt sometimes, even with the excessive planning. And, this is the one thing that you're like, I don't know. I don't know. Let's put it out there and see what happens. And then bam, like that was the pivotal point, and then you're like, wow. So I think this is just a whole bigger point of, you got to trust your own journey in life. You don't know what the shortcomings in life mean to you. You don't know if you're seeing a situation objectively clearly. You don't know if others are seeing your same situation a certain way. But everything essentially works out the more work you put in it, especially if you plan. And I
Yeah.
love that, Mark.
Well,
I'm
and
just
also just the other part of that is just trying. Like, there's so much stuff right now. Like, people are like, well, like, I always like read new podcasters are always like, well, I'm going to try this out. Like, if you're like, I'm just going to try, or like, if you're not fully into it, then you shouldn't do it. Like, you have to be. And I've said this on a different podcast shows. Like, in order to do this, there has to be a little bit of you. It depends on the level, but you have to feed your inner narcissist. And I know that's a bad thing. People go like, oh, I'm not a narcissist. If you're doing a show and you feel like your voice deserves more recognition than other people's voices, or you're trying to do something, even if it's like totally like, oh, I want to do this because I want to do other things. I want to do that. Like, all that's nonsense. You're doing this because you want to feed some kind of need. That's why people get on a comedy stage. No one gets on a comedy stage because they're a humanitarian. They get up there because they think that they're so special and they have something to tell everybody else. That's the only reason why you get up there and start telling jokes. It's the only reason why you pick up a microphone and start being a podcaster. So you got to kind of own a little bit of that, and you got to kind of run with it. You got to be like, look, here's what I want to do explicitly and state it out loud. Here's what I want to do. Here's what I want my show to do. And here's what I'm willing to do to take it. And people are going to be like, oh, yeah, don't worry about getting monetized. Don't worry about making a good show. Just do content. Like, all the people who are telling you, like, don't focus on your personal goals, or don't speak these things aloud. These are the people who are on the advice boards giving advice. They're not the ones actually creating. Like, and I hate that. Like, this is my main argument against like that Reddit group. And I'm not going to name names, but I'll name them.
yeah.
Our podcasting, like, there's a lot of losers. There's just like a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, it's just it's. I don't think it's that they want to hold people down, but there's this whole attitude of like, yeah, don't worry if you fail, don't worry if you fail, it's all right. Like a lot of people fail, but it should be literally like, you can succeed and here's how. What are you willing to do for it? What price are you willing to pay for it? That should be the conversation, not like, oh yeah, it's okay if you buy the mirror microphone and things don't work out. You and your friends had a lot of fun. Like, would you be satisfied with that if you're like, I had a lot of fun during all that, but I wasn't able to meet my goals, my real goals? And no, that's nonsense. You want to, and part of that is being honest with yourself. Like, I'm going to try absolutely hard, and I'm going to do this, and that, and I'm going to be working on that every single day to get to that point.
Absolutely. And I think the notion of, treating your voice with the respect that you want it to deserve also ties into your previous point where if you don't feel like you're a million bucks with your content, who's going to take you seriously? Who's going to give you money? Who's going to listen to you?
Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
and it's not just for podcasting, but it's for life. Like if you don't feel yourself and you don't give uh your creative outlets or you just your person the things that it needs to thrive, other people can see through that and no one's going to take you seriously. And that's such a pivotal point for life. Yeah. Mark, I'm going to wrap up into closing segments in a little bit just because we're a little bit short on time. But is there any other direction that you wanted to veer off with the podcasting or something that you wish I asked that I did not?
I think I don't think there really is. I mean, I think, yeah, those are the big three. I think we've added a fourth one, which we came down trying to remember what our fourth rule was. uh, yeah, iterate, automate, measure relentlessly. Um, yeah, no, I think those are the key ones, and just the marketing stuff that I already mentioned is really important. Yeah, and the just trying hard, actually believing it, and setting goals. Probably setting goals. Yeah, like yeah, like I would. If I would probably ask me something about 2000. What did I learn from 2016 from doing that podcast and not doing it? Because that's probably more spicy in there.
Well, let's ask that question. What did you do in 2016?
So 2016, I was, like I said, I was just an internet troll, just hanging out online, seeing all this stuff, and I saw it was part of this board. I saw this board that was like taking over Reddit, and it was the 2016 election stuff, and I was like, this is really crazy. People are getting so worked up about this. Like, and I remember my original podcast, the original version of the Evil Mark Show. I was like everybody else. I like got in a mic and I'm like, I'm going to do book reviews. I'm going to talk to authors, and I did, like, I never thought anything of it. I was like, yeah, it seems like a fun hobby. Like, and wasn't taking it serious as a business at all. And I was like, I'm just going to be a hobbyist. And that was fine. And I was like, I just want to talk to authors because it would be kind of fun to do in my spare time because I had nothing else going on. And then when all this stuff started happening online in 2016 or before the election in 2016, like I was so fascinated by all these people who were doing weird stuff. And there was like this weird influence of people around that election. I was like, you know what, I'm going to do a podcast of my own. And it's just going to literally be to explore like how, what these people are doing and what this whole thing's about, like try to understand it and talk to other people, and I'm going to try to get guests, and that's where I like basically earned all my lumps, because I was like, I had created this little thing to kind of explore it, and then it started getting attention just because around that time, like, it was so hot, such a hot topic. Everything was kind of blowing up around it, and it was kind of everything was thrust on me in 2016. I was like, oh yeah, well, you should do this. You should have a media kit. You should be doing marketing. You should, like, I was getting listeners like, why aren't you doing this? Like, you shouldn't have your listeners being like, why aren't you marketing better? Why don't I hear you more? Why aren't you working with these people? Like, so it was all in 2016. I like learned a lot of stuff that I eventually knew how to plan. Like, and all those lessons that I learned, unfortunately, like, are not on Reddit, are not on, like, what you find them on is you find them on like really good podcasts that focus on podcast growth or focus on podcasters. You'll hear all these topics that they'll talk about and they'll get in depth about it. But if you actually go online and you start looking for this, you start looking for CPM stuff, or you're looking for marketing, like the whole advice you'll get is just like, oh, put together a good show. It's like, yes, we already know that. Well, how do you do marketing? It's like the dirty secret of for podcasters. There's like a group that knows, and they learn it by hard knocks, and then you can possibly learn it from a couple avenues, but normal, regular normies cannot give you this because they don't care about it. So the most important thing to do is, if you are a podcaster with obsessed with a podcasting and being a successful podcaster, then you have to not only dive in your own genre space, but you need to dive in the genre of podcast professionalism. What are other podcasters doing who are growing shows, who are making shows better, like beyond the, let me get the microphone, beyond the technology stuff, but like the actual building a show, producing, marketing. Like, you need to be deeply, deeply ingrained in that genre as well. Like, you will never learn it. You're going to learn it one of two ways, either by deeply ingraining yourself in the genre, or you're going to go out there and you're going to take your lumps and you're going to get your head kicked in like I did all of 2016, where I had a top 5 show in politics, but I couldn't sell any advertising. That's because
Wow.
that's how crazy it was. It was just never, that's how it was laid out, and it never worked out for me. And then as 2017 came in, all those things went away. Everything that was so hot about that drove this country wild, that drove America wild. Once it was kind of wrapped up, no one people didn't really want to dwell on it. You kind of moved on. And that's the other thing. If you when you make a show or you're part of your show, you have to be the focal point of your show. Like it has to be around you. It cannot just be around one topic, because topics move and change, and they kind of go off, and there's always going to be the new hottest thing. Your listener base has to be invested in you the person, not you the person who's following this topic.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna, you know what? I'm gonna dive in on that question, Mark. We might go a little over time, so hopefully you don't hate me too much. But
No, I don't
how
care.
do you get people invested in you? What's your secret for that? What's the secret sauce?
I think in my mind, and I could be totally wrong,
It's
but
mayonnaise, isn't it?
yeah, no, no, it's definitely not mayonnaise. It's obviously ranch. We all know
Oh,
that.
ranch on pizza though, or no?
Yes, definitely
Okay.
ranch on
Okay.
everything.
Okay. Okay. Just making sure. Just making sure.
No, I could be totally, absolutely 100% wrong. And again, like you can see my sign in the background. You see it says Tempe. I went to Arizona State, so take this with a grain of salt because I am an idiot. Like I'm a self-avowed idiot. I know some stuff, but there's some stuff I could definitely get wrong. But in my mind, for me, especially when I'm fans of other people, when you remove that barrier between you and your listenership, like when there's no lines, when they'll know exactly who I am. I've gone on my show, even though it's a sports talk show, we do a 3 questions bit where we talk about things, 3 questions about things you like or dislike. I'm just trying to be totally who I am, authentically myself. And then I also just share whatever I want to share. I'm just going to share. There's never a point where I go, I don't want to mention this. Like I've talked about how I got gonorrhea on my show. I talked about how when I was in college, I got gonorrhea at Manzanita Hall, and I talked about like we talked about it jokingly, but I talked about it not like I can't believe I got gonorrhea. I'm a victim. Like I talked about it as look, this happened. It was really messed up, and it was goofy. It was stupid, and I was a college kid. That's what happens. And people at the time, my co-host was like, maybe you can catch a lot of hell for that. And I'm like, no, but like if you put it out there, you put out who you are, then people will like you and they'll like your show, but they'll like you first. So no matter what happens, no matter what you do in other projects, they're going to like you, and they're going to listen to you, and they're going to follow you, and they're going to want to be involved with you, and they're going to want to interact with you if they know the real you, and they know that you're going to be forthright and you're going to tell them everything. I think the moment people want to get cagey, they're like, I don't want to share this with them. I don't know if I want to do this. You've already bought into part of your narcissism that you should have a voice in this space. You should just buy into the other half that everyone should know everything about you. Like this, unfortunately, this is the world that we're in right now. If you follow anybody on Instagram or anything like that, there was a time where you could be removed. You could be 1 or 2 levels removed from your listenership, from your audience. Now you have to be fully in with them. They have to know exactly who you are, what you represent, what's your thoughts. And you know what the fear is like, and my fear was like whether they're going to disagree with me. Like in my personal life, I'm a libertarian. Like I believe in gun ownership. I believe in like all kinds of like crazy American stuff. Like stopping migrant. Like I believe all that stuff. I believe a lot of it. Some of it I can disagree with, but I'm going to be honest about it. Like, the fear there is that like, well, people won't like me because I believe in this. You just leave it out there. There's no one who's a listener who listens to whoever and goes, I believe everything that guy says. If someone
Yeah.
says, I believe everything that so and so says, there's a problem there. There's a deeper psychological problem. Most people go, I really like so and so. I really love X so and so podcaster, but on the topic of blah blah blah, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. And I wish he would stop talking about that because it's really driving me crazy. But I like that guy. I like him. He's a good-hearted guy. But on that one topic, yeah, I don't know. And that's how it should be. That's how you should be as a listener. But on the opposite side of that, as a creator, then you should be putting it out there. You should just be yourself, say what you believe in. Even if people don't like that one thing, they won't hold it against you if they like you, because they'll know underneath it all, you're a good guy. You just have a stupid opinion. And that's like everybody.
Absolutely. And these opinions are actually a differentiator that we are talking about earlier in the show, right? How do we differentiate from the podcast? Well, how about we actually be ourselves, share who we are, and the people that are going to like us are going to like us. The people that won't, well, they're
Yeah.
lost. And it creates it's kind of like, what's it called? It just creates a strong bond between that, because before that, you're just a flat person, but now you have some depth to you. You have some originality. Okay, so you're not just a person who's talking about sports. You're also a libertarian. You care about freedom. Why do you care about freedom? What experiences have you had? Why did you decide to get gonorrhea? I mean, and it's like, it kind of, It's really interesting because I think this is not a talked about point enough, and especially in a realm where audio is the only thing in your ear in podcasting. This authenticity is so important. I'm not sure if you agree with me, Mark, but I feel like when you're holding something back, would you agree with me when people can feel that?
Oh yeah, yeah. You like you can feel like if someone's not really giving you their opinion, or they'd be like, "Oh, I don't want to say this. I don't, I don't want to say that." Like people know, like they know that you're holding back on them, and they're like, "Well, the guy should just say it. Like he should just let it rip, and then let the chips fall where they may." And you think of it, if you're really, if you're like most podcasters, like 99.9% of podcasters, if you're starting from absolute zero, or maybe point something, because you have a little bit of notoriety, unless you're a famous person who comes from a TV show or you have a really big following, you're like everyone else in this world, you're in the podcasting world, you're starting from zero, so you're literally playing with house money at the very beginning and as you go. The people who came in at episode 1, they're going to stick with you the rest of the way. You're going to build on that. So if you say something wrong, or you have a weird thought that maybe other people don't agree with it, people are willing to give you leeway on that. They're not going to hold that against you. You can't be canceled if you don't really have anything. So you're playing with house money. It's best to just go for it, let it all hang out there, and then just the people who like you. You're always, if you have a good product and you're committed to it, and you're consistent, you will find your audience. There's an audience out there for you that's going to like what you do. It's just a matter of finding those people and bringing those people on. You don't need to sell to everybody. No one sells to everybody. Even the podcasts that come from popular television shows, they're here and they're gone. There was an Anchorman podcast. Exactly. No one knows there was an Anchorman podcast because
Really?
it lasted about 10 episodes, because for the first couple ones, it was like, oh, it's great because he's doing the Anchorman character. It's funny. It's really funny. But then you got to a point where you're like, okay, this is enough already. Like, there's nothing there. You've seen both movies, the second one being bad. Now you could listen to a pod. Like, to them, it made sense because it's another way to sell stuff. But if you're a real podcaster, then, and you're not just trying to sell a product, or you're not part of a movie studio, you're not part of all that, then you have to sell yourself, and people are going to like you. They're going to be in the whole way. You just got to be honest with them. You just can't be like, all right, well, this is my manufactured identity, and this is what I'm going to sell to everybody, but I'm not going to give them any more. I'm not going to give them any more than that. Those lines are long gone. You have to give them, just like your effort has to be all in, like your personality has to be all in, good or bad, and people are going to like you for it, and you'll find your tribe if you fly that flag.
That's amazing. I love that. And it's a point that, again, is underrated. And it's something that I hope helps the future podcasters who are listening to this. So, Mark, just cognizant on time, I'm going to go into our outro. So, what is your one message to our audience today? It can be on something that we talked about, something that you were thinking of in the shower this morning, or anything that you really want to talk about.
Yeah, if you're considering, if you are a podcaster who's getting started, or your podcaster's been doing this for a while and you wanted to be better, or even if you're thinking of doing podcasting, like, you are definitely in the right space. Like I said earlier at the very top of this episode, I said it's a gold rush. It's a gold rush, right? So in my mind, it's a gold rush. So what happened in the California gold rush? When people started coming out to California, they started flooding out there. A lot of people flooded out there. They didn't have a plan. They didn't bring the right tools. That's the difference. So if you're going to go out, if you're going to go in this gold rush, you need to bring the right equipment to actually mine the gold. So you got to have you got to have the right mentality. You got to have the right technology tools. You got to have the right marketing tools. You got to have a solid plan. So instead of just rushing out there like everyone else and like trying to dig up gold with a spoon, you're going to go out there. You're going to be so far ahead of everybody. So, and even if you've started already and you're like, I'm not getting where I want because of this, because I haven't thought about this, then stop, shut it down, bring it back when you're ready. There's no harm in, I'm telling my version, my show, when I think about what I've done, the book show, which had originally started, and then there was a series of planning. I was going to bring this back as an after show to the original show I did in 2016. This is like the fourth iteration of my show, like 4.0. And it's just now that we're actually getting some advertisers that I would even consider us out of beta. Like, I would consider this a fully formed show now. So there's 4 iterations. That means in that 4 iterations, there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of losses, and not just dollars, but in time and effort. There's so many losses right now compared to the wins. It would look like I've done everything completely wrong. But if you don't put yourself out there for all those losses, then you'll never get the wins. So that's my message, is like, if you're doing it, if you're thinking of doing it, or you're doing it and you're not getting the results you want, then you need to go back, revamp it, go to the next iteration. You cannot get stuck on the idea that if you go away, people will never come back. People will like you if you tell them I'm going away because I need to figure this and this out. People will be so excited when you get back, and they'll be so excited to give you a chance. You just can't go away all the time, but obviously people wouldn't do that. But you just got to believe in yourself, and you got to believe in your plan, and you really, 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 no matter what genre you're going to be in, you need to know that genre better than anybody else who'd ever listen to your show. Anybody else. There'd be if you are in the genre of true crime, then you should have listened to more true crime podcasts than anyone else. You should know what works, what doesn't work. And that goes with everything. It all comes back to research and planning and roadmap. And when I say roadmap, I know I said that many times. I didn't give you a definition, but you literally need to put out, what am I going to accomplish it in the next 7 days? What am I going to accomplish in the next 30 days? What am I going to accomplish in the next, 6 months? And then you need to be going back to your plan every single week and going, okay, well, what's changed here? What's off the list? What's changed here? You literally have to be road mapping exactly what your project is from start to finish. Me personally, I like a 2 week idea. I literally have short-term, long-term goals. I call short-term roadmap, long-term roadmap, and I'm literally going over it every 2 weeks, both roadmaps. I'm going, where am I at? What have I done? What have I failed on? And there's a lot of fails. Every 2 weeks, I look at a lot of failures. I go, what can I do better? And then we build the next one. And then we go to the next one. Every 2 weeks, I'm constantly thinking about my plan, what I need to change. And then far roadmap, long term, what do I want to do? What am I going to do now to make things better? What am I going to do long term? You always, always, always have to be planning, even after you've quote unquote made it. Like, I've got money from Manscaped, which I love. And like, that's great. Like, now we have real advertisers. I don't go like, okay, great. Now I'm going to cash checks. Now I'm going to have a party. Like, I'm going to go back to Vegas, celebrate 1 year anniversary. Like, no, all this needs to go back to my show. How am I going to make this thing better? Just never rest on your laurels.
That's huge. And Mark, where can people find you on social media?
So you can find, oh yeah. Yeah, I'm just going to interrupt you. Let me just stop right there. Okay. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at EVLMRK, Evil Mark, EVLMRK. And then also, most importantly, I am on Twitter. I will respond to your DMs, but more importantly, just come to my website at evilmark.com. Evilmark.com. There you'll find all the shows, all the links, everything you ever wanted, all the show notes, a lot of all kinds of content, and that'll push you back to the Twitter. So if you're not into Twitter, that's fine. You're like scared of Elon Musk or something. That's okay. That's okay. Just come to my website. You can enjoy the show, and there's all kinds of goodness there. But eventually, you're going to want to get to Twitter because I'm there and I interact with you as well. So yeah, those are the two places to find me.
That's beautiful. Mark, this was such a powerful episode, man. We talked about your journey in podcasting. We talked about how iterating episodes is so important. And without it, you wouldn't have gotten to the success that you did. We talked about the importance of professionalism, how believing in yourself, feeling yourself, and projecting that out there is one of the biggest keys out there to gain listeners, sponsorships, and really move this business forward. We've talked about how, the things that we think are bad may actually be good. And the failures that we go through are pivotal for our growth, not only personally, but through our business. And I just really appreciate our episode and our time together because I think this is really, like you said earlier, a roadmap to success in a way, because we get a little picture of how it all works. We started with a couple hundred downloads, and now I didn't even ask you how many downloads you're doing now. So feel free to mention that after I'm done. But it's crazy. You're in the top 25 sometimes podcasts, top 50 consistently, and you are really sharing some nuggets of gold with everyone. So I really appreciate the lessons you brought here and the time.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it having me on the show. And then, like, if anyone wants to reach out, I put this out on other podcasts too. Like, if you are in that space of like you are a podcaster who's trying to go from little show, like your things are starting to go right for you, like where do I go next? You can always. I'm not a consultant, and I won't charge you anything, but I can give you my experience. So definitely reach out to me at evilmark.com. I want to see other podcasters grow. Like I said, I want to see them do good. This is not a feast or famine situation. Like, if I win, then you lose. Everybody can win. We can all find our audiences, because what's losing is FM radio and a lot of these other media channels. So if you are there and you feel like you're right on the cusp, or you got things moving right, and you're like, how do I do that marketing? I wanted to get more into, I wanted him to talk to more about what else he is like. Just reach out to me directly. I won't charge you anything. You might have to hear some of my stupid opinions on other things, but I will definitely lend you my assistance.
Ranch on pizza, not a stupid opinion.
Yeah, that one's not that's not a stupid opinion. There's other ones. There are definitely other ones, but that one's a good one.
That one's a good one for sure. Fair enough. Mark, thank you so much, my man. I really appreciate you. And to the listeners and viewers of the Personal Process Podcast, thank you for joining in on another episode, and we hope to catch you on the next one.
Hey everyone.
I'm back after another amazing episode with another amazing guest. We hope we added value into your life so you could take the tips from this episode and fuel your process forward. If you enjoyed our episode today and think other friends or family members may also appreciate the lessons that our podcast brings, be sure to share us with them. Subscribe and rate our show so we know how we did. And always remember, trust the process.